are in the spotlight like never before in politics, society, and business. And taking on a leadership role in a big organisation brings constant pressure and complex challenges. In previous podcast episodes here on the Business of Being Brilliant, we've discussed some of the difficulties that leaders can face, such as burnout and isolation. Today, we're asking the question, how can we set leaders up to be successful in their roles? How do leaders really feel about stepping into new roles? What support is available to them? And how can organisations make the most of these pivotal moments to help a new leader to settle in confidently? Joining me to share her wisdom is executive coach and leadership transition specialist Jenn Fenwick, who is renowned for giving senior leaders a strategic edge during pivotal moments of challenge, transition, and change. Leaders say that working with Jenn is like rocket fuel. With a background in both sporting and professional worlds, she blends executive and high-performance coaching with a focus on well-being to help leaders of global organisations to thrive in their roles. She does all of that whilst being mum to 4-year-old twins as well. Welcome to the Business of Being Brilliant, Jenn.
Oh, I love it. It's funny when you all hear it. You know, when we how we see ourselves. But I was like, actually, that's quite a lot.
I know. Pat yourself on the back. It's deeply impressive, and you're not the first podcast guest who says, "Wow, that sounds really good." So it's lovely to get that reaction.
Plus juggling the 4-year-old twins. So I know which job can be more challenging at times.
I'm sure there's a few listeners listening saying kudos, hats off to you. I'm sure lots of us would feel not quite up to that particular challenge. But have you been enjoying the summer with them?
Oh, do you know, it's been wonderful. I think we spoke before about, I've had my mum over from Australia. She was here for 6 weeks, and Granny Annie, and the kids just love her. So she actually, because of the kids were born at the start of the pandemic, she actually didn't meet them until they were 2.
Wow.
And because she wasn't able to come over from Australia, but she's come over kind of every year since, and they've got such a wonderful relationship. I love it. Although the pressure's now on because Granny does amazing experiments with them, so like creating volcanoes and all this cool stuff. And now Granny's gone back to Australia. They keep asking, so what experiments are we going to do, Mum? So the pressure's on.
Oh, bless. Yeah. Living up to brilliant grandparents presents another parenting challenge, doesn't it? But you have to save those special moments for the next Granny Annie visit. But that's lovely to hear how you manage the distance as a family, and fantastic. And today's obviously about an aspect of our world of work, and in particular, leaders' experience of work that is right at the heart of what you do in your work life and how you help leaders. So just tell us briefly how you got into helping leaders step into new roles. Yeah, what led you to focus on that?
Yeah, do you know, I love it, and it's how it's kind of worked out quite organically. I mean, I obviously had a corporate leadership career of my own within kind of HR, talent attraction development. And when I launched my business, I think not quite 8 years ago, I approached it a little bit, I took the pressure off myself, and I approached it a little bit playfully because, I think, with coaching's, an incredible tool. And it's so incredible. You can use it in so many different scenarios. But when you're setting up a business, that can make it quite tricky because how do you position yourself? How do people know who you are and how you can actually help? So when I looked at the kind of the year ahead, I thought, I was going to take the pressure off and just put myself out there and see who needs me, who needs Jenn. And over the first 6 months, it became really clear actually, that the number one group of leaders that were approaching me for coaching support were leaders in transition. So leaders who had maybe just signed, on the dotted line for a new contract, a brand new role. It was really exciting, and they were just really up for the challenge. But also, as day one neared, starting to fear those very natural, worries, anxieties, fears of, oh my goodness, can I do this? What do I fail? Have I bitten off more than I can chew? And then also leaders maybe a few months into starting a new role who were overwhelmed, feeling quite burnt out, doubting themselves, feeling like an imposter. So quite early on, I was like, do you know what? First of all, I love working with this group of leaders. I love supporting them, kind of pluck them out of the overwhelm, all the complexities and challenges, and helping them to really, get that laser focus and help them lay the foundations for success early on, so they can have big impact without the overwhelm. So I loved all that. And so I really thought, actually, this is what I would love to specialize on. So it was based on just the leaders coming to me. But the interesting thing was also from an organizational perspective. You and I have both worked with a number of organizations. With my organizational hat on, I was thinking leaders are coming to me, investing out their own pocket at these pivotal moments, big juicy moments. Where are organizations missing an opportunity or missing a trick? What's going on there? So I think that next level of exploration, and a lot of the work I do now, which is working directly with organizations, was looking at, okay, what does onboarding look like for leaders, of a certain level? When leaders are being internally promoted, what support system is there? What does that look like? When leaders are moving internationally, what, again, global mobility as a function or as a service, what could be different? And it actually made me realize that there's just a lack of support, a lack of robust support that's fit for the level of challenge and complexity that leaders face.
Yeah, I can imagine how much more powerful that is to look at both sides of the coin, because I think probably most people would assume that the coaching element really, it just obviously supports the individual, but then, as you say, there's potentially a real gap in the way the organization's set up to support those leaders, and then maybe not taking the leader perspective on it. They're maybe just thinking about it from just a process or policy point of view, and they're not really thinking about the experience and needs of the individual. So
Absolutely.
really interesting, to hear that you help both the employers and the organisation and the individuals. And we're going to explore both aspects over the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. So starting with the individual, what do you typically hear from leaders that you're coaching, whether they're stepping into a new role or whether they've been in there a while and are fighting the overwhelm and feeling like they just not sure how it's working out for them? Do you hear some common kind of things coming out of your sessions, or does it just really vary by individual?
It's so varied, I think. But I mean, the first thing that kind of jumps to mind is sink or swim. And actually, I was hearing that a lot. Actually, I feel like it's just sink or swim. And actually, I ran a survey last year, actually, of around 500 leaders. The specific group were leaders who were transitioning and making international moves within their organizations. So, so international placements, global mobility. And I just looked at, with the level of support. And 84% of the leaders surveyed felt that they were left to sink or swim. The rest had been allocated either a coach or mentor during transition and had felt supported. So that's something that I hear quite a lot. And from a range of levels, you're looking at kind of, more, leaders earlier in their career up to executive. I've worked with up to first-time CEOs, So, so across, I think there is an assumption that as leaders grow in experience and seniority, that they just will be able to navigate the new role with ease. However, as we progress, the level of challenge, complexity, moving parts, visibility, expectations, there's that all increases, but actually the level of support reduces.
That's really interesting, because I would assume that someone that's maybe been in big leadership roles before and then is just stepping up a notch, has got a bit more confident at managing that transition, knows kind of what to look out for, what to pay attention to. But I guess, as you say, it just becomes more nuanced depending on the level and the
Yes.
nature of the leadership challenge, but also I guess their home life and
Oh,
what's going on
absolutely.
in their own life as well, because at different
Absolutely.
life stages that can be completely different. So
Yeah, and it is. It is so nuanced. This is it, and I think that you could be working with someone who's moving into a slightly different role. So it's and so that person, that might be an easy transition where they don't, where maybe the level of support is that they maybe have a peer mentor, or that they just have those more regular check-ins with their own leader or HR business partner. However, a lot of leaders who are making bold moves, who are they may be transitioning not into a more senior role, but they're also making an international move, or they're making a move into their first time strategic role where it's a real change in mindset, way of working, or first time on the board, as an executive. So it's all these kind of it is nuanced, but it's looking at what is the support needs to be equal to the level of challenge. So you've got a real robust support crew around that person and program, that's fit for purpose.
yeah, I love the idea of a kind of support crew, and it's very tailored. And do you hear, is there a gender difference playing out here? Do women need different support to men, or is that not really the biggest factor driving
No,
the challenges they
yeah.
face?
It's quite. Yeah, it's actually a great question, because I spent a lot of years working in talent attraction. So I worked with global organisations on how do we find the best people. How do we recruit awesome talent into our organisations, and then with my coaching backgrounds around how do we support them. But there was often a gender split as far as women were slower to raise their hand for promotions, or maybe men would look at a role and apply when they were could do 50% versus women maybe waiting to 70-80%. So there was then. However, the interesting thing is that in transition, actually, I've not noticed a difference. Actually, it's often down to the individual in that new
Yeah,
role. So
yeah.
actually, leaders of all levels, all genders, have find it complex and challenging in different ways.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
understand that. Yeah, so the gender element
Mm,
doesn't play out quite so strongly when you're just
yeah.
managing a transition. So, what are some of the assumptions that we might typically make about leaders? I mean, you touched on it a little bit earlier, saying, well, we think, well, if they've been in a leadership role before, they kind of are used to taking on a new challenge, or yeah, are there some common traps that we fall into when we think
Yeah.
about a leader and what support they might want or
Yeah,
need?
I think it's even around the word support, because I think when I speak to a lot of organisations and maybe leaders who have, I guess, an well, I would say maybe a more old school approach to what support looks like, people often think support equals weakness. Actually, I've heard so many times that actually we only recruit the best. We only recruit and promote the best. So they don't need support or handholding, but support is not handholding. And actually, I guess this is where my sporting background comes into play. Is actually if you look at sports teams, athletes, your top athletes, you don't wait for them to raise a hand and say, "Hey, I'm struggling," or "Hey, I could maybe benefit from some help here." You give them a robust support crew and an expert team around them from day one. So
Yeah.
and that's so it gives them an edge, and don't so I think there's an assumption that support equals weakness, or support is reflective of there being something wrong with that leader, but actually it's not. I think it's, again, making sure that you give that leader the best support and best chance of success, and actually in right from day one. And it's not because there's anything wrong with that leader, but it's just that the level of challenge and complexity can be, it's not even just overwhelming, but it's just really how you support a leader get to that moment of impact faster. So it gives
Yeah.
them an edge.
Yeah, exactly. Help them really hit the ground running, help them,
Yeah,
enjoy their role and want to stay. I've been doing quite a lot of interviews with CEOs as part of my work recently, including for book two, which is going to
I
be
love it. Yeah.
brewing, writing properly in September from September. And I had a conversation with one recently, and he was talking exactly about that, about making really senior hires, so to kind of leadership team, UK or European leadership team level, and saying they go to great lengths during the hiring process to make sure it's not a sales pitch from one side to the other, both ways. It's a conversation that keeps happening, so it's quite iterative, about how do we make this work for you. What
Mm,
are the realities you're going to be wrestling with at home and at work in this role? What are the challenges going to be? What support structure do you have in place? What
mm-hmm,
flexibility do you need? you know
mm,
and and I think he was saying that he's learned over the years that that kind of conversation is so critical, because what happens in year one is the leader will, just dive in and do their best at, whatever the sacrifice. But by year two, it is sink or swim stage. And they're like, do I really want to be carrying on like this? And that's
yeah,
often where they start to lose leaders. So
absolutely. Yeah,
I love the idea of actually decoupling the concept of support, the concept of weakness, and actually saying, no, it's about performance, actually, and it's
absolutely.
about
Yeah.
your system around you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's just what I love. Obviously, with that coming from that sporting background, I love the Olympic. We've got the Olympics
Yeah.
going on at the moment, and I'm just loving. When you see the gold medalists, and and then you look at, they talk about the support crew, and actually, we had yesterday the Scottish, the Great Britain 1500 meter silver medalist. He has a sports psychologist, a coach, and
Yeah.
man, he's got this whole this whole network around him, and that's it. Giving people that kind of strategic edge, and we all need support. And I think another thing that's I guess an assumption is that a transition, a leader moving into a new role, is not just the kind of the learning and the kind of the knowledge that there's a real emotional, psychological journey and roller coaster that leaders go through. That's just innate to who we are as humans. When we are faced with growth, change, challenge, new, our deep rooted human fears, anxieties come to the surface. Our personal, derailers, baggage comes to the surface, and that's and for the most part, people haven't always got a toolkit on how to navigate that.
Mm.
Some leaders, in my experience, have had coaches and mentors and are maybe more self-aware and do have a toolkit. But it shouldn't be assumed that high achieving leader that you're bringing in, that awesome new leader that you're bringing in, has a toolkit for navigating that level of newness and challenge. And actually, because we always need to refresh it, because there's always an evolution required, and so it's almost, we need to refresh that toolkit on how we navigate the psychological and emotional journey that we're on, and that's very difficult
Mm.
to do alone when our default is to the old and the kind of path of least resistance.
Yeah, that's a great point about just, how aware of our own responses are we when we're faced with newness and challenge, and what can we think about doing differently, or our choices in how we might respond to that. So,
Mm.
flipping to the organizational viewpoint, what are some of the things that you might recommend to an organization to pay attention to help a new leader settle in? Can you share any examples of things that they might look at through fresh eyes, or do differently, or put in place that might make a real difference to a leader stepping into a new role?
Yeah, I definitely think it starts with community. So I think there'll be there's a lot of C's coming, but there's a community. So again, you've heard me talk about support crew, building that community, that robust support crew around a leader. And what I love, some organisations, when I'm speaking to them, it's about having that internal support crew. So they obviously have their reporting manager. Often they'll have an HR business partner. Allocating them with maybe a peer mentor, someone that can help them to really understand and navigate the culture, the politics, make introductions, but also for those at a particular level or moving into roles that are particularly challenging, to then look at an external, an independent person. So that's often where I come in. So bringing in someone completely independent, who then has that kind of specialist knowledge. So I think that's building that is a great starting place. Then it's really looking at that clarity. I think you mentioned it before. Just making sure that there's a real clarity around role/expectations. Because actually, how often leaders go in and it can be quite different to it's just making sure that there is that real clarity. I think again also making sure that the leader is really feeling confident as soon as possible. And I think confidence comes through closing learning gaps. So it's making sure that what are the big learning gaps that that leader has in coming into that role. Have they been, is it maybe their first time as an executive, or so maybe so working with them to identify the evolution required, and what is new and the learning gaps. Because if you can do that early, then confidence rises and performance rises early. But often, what it's like. You go in and leaders want to come in and do. So there's kind of like that action imperative when we, and want to do and prove and get things moving. So there's, and often the learning is bumped. But actually, so making sure that there's that priority and focus on early learning, because I see that makes a huge impact. And then it's also just that continuous feedback, communication, and check-ins as well. Again, making sure that just checking in on what's the progress. Celebrating the learnings, the progress with the leader. Looking at what the observations are. Just giving that feedback loop as well. So I think that that really helps, because often leaders will go in and it's just they're left to get on with it, and that's great to a certain point, because obviously, the leaders, they for the most part, have expertise to bring, but it's just making sure that there is that opportunity for them to be pulled out of the busyness and the doing for check-ins.
Yeah, I love that. Those 4 C's that you just described, they're super clear. Thank you. And who is typically having these conversations? Who is paying attention to a leaders community? Who's clarifying the role and expectation? Is it always their boss? Is it someone from HR? I mean, is it the leader themselves, but pulling on different conversations?
Yeah, and this is in my exploration. Unfortunately, often this isn't done, well. And I think so. This is where there's elements of what the organisation can do to just say, hey, look, this is welcome. But I guess we're talking about leaders joining for the first time. There's leaders who are being promoted or going on international assignment, and sometimes those internal moves, that this type of stuff doesn't happen. It's more likely to happen when leaders are joining an organisation that someone thinks, hang on, we've got someone new, we need to maybe hear some ways we can set them up. So, and with the internal movers, often it gets a bit lost, and so I do think there's an art to transitions, and I guess where I come in is working with the leader to do it, to make sure that they're doing this themselves, because obviously you don't, as a leader joining an organisation, the expectation is not that everything's going to be handed to you, but it's still so working with the leader to actually say, what is it you need, what are those gaps, so that they can do it themselves as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I get what you say about organisations more likely to think through this a bit more carefully with an external hire than with an internal promotion or international move. So that's a great reminder for anyone listening to this to just maybe check in with, I guess, people's experiences of having recently had a promotion or moved
Yeah,
abroad, and
yeah,
even do a little bit of gentle research and conversations to find out what did they need, what did they
yeah.
get.
And I think what the challenge, I mean, transitions come with quite a high level of failure slash derailment slash burnout rate. I think that was one of the things when I started to look at it from an organizational perspective that really, kind of shook me. Having spent so long, I was, executive search, helped build executive search functions in organizations before. So when I saw that the failure rate is up to 40, can be, like 40, even 50% failure rate, derailment rate of leaders in transition, I fell off my chair because I thought, I knew
Wow.
the amount of, even just the amount of time, energy, money that goes into just finding that person, then let alone the pain and cost of someone then starting the role and it not working out, not just financially, but the impact on the people, so I was just like, how is that possible? So, and that's, I guess, why I get on my soapbox a lot, because I'm thinking, it's a huge cost, but it doesn't have to be that way. If we just started looking at transitions, in a different way, and, and not assuming that leaders will just crack on or raise their hand and ask for help when they need, but making sure that we make sure that there is some program and there is a support crew around those leaders in transition. Because
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find that's fascinating and really powerful as a business case, I guess. If someone's listening and thinking, intuitively, I think we need to put in place better support or look at this more carefully as an organization. But you've just given a great way of, I guess, demonstrating the value and the return on investment of
absolutely,
investing some
yeah,
time and effort and some dedicated
yeah,
support around that. Think of all the costs, compare that to the cost and investment of securing those leaders in the first place.
yeah. But that's, if you lose, if one leader derails, or one leader leaves within 3 or 4 months, or even stays but underperforms for 18 months, the cost of that, you could have someone coaching however many leaders for that, like there's just. And actually it's interesting because I was speaking to a head of talent, a global head of talent, a few months ago, and she actually used this as a business case to get investment to create a robust onboarding program for leaders, was to look at, this is the cost of us not doing anything. This is the current. But actually, let's flip it. Because I was saying to her, if you flip it and say, right, this is, what an incredible leader value proposition for someone joining your organization. What an incredible, message that sends to a leader in your organization who's making a bold move to say, hey, we value you, we believe in you, but we want to invest in you in this level to give you the best chance of success. So there's so it's
Yeah, super powerful. Really speaks to you as a human, doesn't it, as well, knowing there's that proactive support and seeing this as a long-term mutual win-win that you want to make
absolutely.
happen.
Yeah.
And my final question, which is very cheekily linked to the new book I'm about to be writing, People Glue, Hold On to Your Best People by Letting Go. It's about how we can create more freedom for people in their roles and careers that makes them want to stay, ironically.
Yeah.
What do you tend to hear from leaders that you've coached about? Is there anything in particular that comes up for them that persuades them to stay?
Yeah. I loved it.
Kind of to the flip side of that point you just made about how many not fail, but the fallout rate. What makes them stay?
Yeah, I love the name of your new book, by the way. That's
Thank
great.
you.
And, but I think retention is so, it's so important. Because actually, again, I think, as I said, finding awesome people and finding great leaders, it's challenging, and but actually, how do we retain them? And so, I guess with relation to transitions, the interesting thing is that. People will make a decision whether they want to stay, whether they are going to stay or go, within a matter of months of joining an organization. So it's very quick. So you need to hook them, and this I'm talking about leaders joining an organization, so so you need to hook them, win over their hearts and minds fast and early, and a lot of that comes through the feeling of being part of a community, so that connection. So again, when we're talking about having that robust support crew, actually, you're connecting, you're working, you're building those relationships. You kind of feel supported, you feel seen, you feel, you have that, I guess, even that psychological safety. You have an investment in you, and and your evolution, and so I mean that screams, well, welcome, doesn't it? And the flip side of that, unfortunately, so I was speaking to a leader earlier this year who had made a global move to join a new organisation, and she'd moved her family over. And within a matter of weeks, her boss had left, her colleague had left. She was in this new role, which, again, became suddenly expanded, but she was trying to see it as an opportunity to expand. But actually, when she asked for support, and she said, look, to be able to navigate this, in a new role, I've moved internationally, people are leaving, I would really benefit from having some support around me, some coaching support. And actually, it was declined, and so and that she very quickly decided this is not a place for me. So it's just looking at what do you want your leaders, what do you want your people to be saying, about their experience when they've joined. But I think it's people want to feel part of something, but I think a big part of that is the community, the support, the investment in them and their evolution and their success.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to be weaving that into my chapter on leaders and how to retain leaders and what freedom for leaders looks like, including the freedom to pull in the support you need at critical moments, I think.
Absolutely.
So, fantastic.
We're seeing that more and more, actually, leaders now going to interview or going through that process of, of contract negotiation and saying, look, this is a big step for me. I'm really excited, and I'm going to make a success of this. Actually, what I need is actually, I work with a coach, or this is what I need, and I'm much more empowered to say, right, this is what's really going to help set me up personally for success. So we are seeing a shift in leaders being quite empowered and open about what they need, and so which is great, because it's really a long time coming.
Yeah, and I've heard the same around exiting as well as joining. It's like negotiating what support they need to manage the transition out of the organisation as well. So, really interesting to hear that. We could explore this for far longer, I know, but we have come to the end of our podcasting conversation. It's been such fun, such a joy to chat with you about this. Thank you for, explaining to listeners, the risks and pitfalls around leaders sinking or swimming, what the roller coaster of stepping into a new role, either joining another organization or in your existing organization, can feel like, and the challenges that can bring. And then just some very practical things that organizations can think about and pay attention to and put in place to help these really talented, valuable, but not infallible leaders to navigate that change. So thank you so much for your time. If people want to get in touch professionally, what's the best way for them to do that?
And I would love, if anyone's got any more questions or want to spark a conversation around all of this, please, come find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Jenn Fenwick, or drop me an email. It's Jenn, JENN, at JennFenwick, FENWICK.com. I'd love to chat.
Brilliant. I'll pop links to both of those, your LinkedIn profile and your email, in the show notes. So have a look there if you're wanting to get in touch with Jenn. Thank you so much, Jenn. It's been a joy podcasting with you. You've been a brilliant guest.
Yeah, and good luck with the book. I'm looking forward to reading it when it comes out. Let me know.
I will. Thank you so much.